As he went into the court, it was almost...
After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury in the rape trial of Mike Tyson has spoken.
Back into the court.
CNN Headline News. I'm David Goodnow. Guilty. That is the decision from 9 men and 3 women in Indianapolis in the rape trial of boxer Mike Tyson. They reached the verdict less than an hour ago. Tyson's been found guilty on 3 counts, including rape and 2 counts of deviant criminal sexual conduct. Tyson now faces up to 60 years in prison. Jurors deliberated almost 10 hours after hearing testimony from dozens of witnesses. During today's closing arguments, both the defense and prosecution pulled no punches. Prosecutor Greg Garrison portrayed Tyson as a thug in a wolf in sheep's clothing and took advantage of his fame to attack the victim. For more now, we go live to Charles Ewey in Indianapolis.
Fighter Mike Tyson, on the 2nd anniversary of his loss of the heavyweight championship of the world tonight, was convicted of rape. Tyson went back into Marion County Superior Court just a short time ago to hear the verdict read by a jury that had deliberated more than 9 hours before coming up with its verdict. The jury worked continuously after getting the case at about 1 o'clock Eastern time this afternoon, worked straight through dinner, and came up with its verdict only a short time ago, within the hour, advising Judge Patricia Gifford that they had indeed reached a verdict. As Tyson entered the court, he said nothing, looking glum, almost like he knew what was coming. Inside of the court, the jury filed back in, and the judge, Judge Gifford, read off each count: guilty to count 1, guilty to count 2 of deviant conduct, guilty to count 3 of deviant conduct. Of course, the most important charge of rape. Tyson was ordered to surrender his passport immediately and to report back here to the Marion County Court building for a pre-sentencing investigation tomorrow morning. He was released also on an existing $30,000 bond. Mike Tyson now facing up to 60 years in jail as a result of the conviction on all 3 counts of rape and deviant conduct. Again, Mike Tyson guilty tonight on all 3 counts against him. This is Charles Ewey reporting live from Indianapolis.
What was to come down. The jurors were polled, all jurors polled on all 3 counts. All of them stood to say guilty as charged. Guilty on the first count, which was rape, and on the 2 additional counts of criminal deviant conduct. Mike Tyson will be sentenced on March 6th as the judge at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon here. He will have to remain here in Indianapolis tomorrow for a pre-sentence investigation, which will begin then. Tyson had to surrender his passport. He didn't have it with him. Don King and John Horn, who you know well, I know Nick, stood at the front of the court and said, we have Mike's passport, and they surrendered it to the judge. Tyson went immediately out. Pete, I don't know, do we have the pictures there, perhaps out in the truck? We do have pictures of Mike Tyson as he walked back in, and I think perhaps if we have those, there you go. You see Tyson, John Horn, you see to his left. Don King, for the first time at this trial, also showed up here. I don't think we're going to see Don in this picture. He got here a little bit sooner, but for the first time, Don King showed up on the scene. I think there had been some speculation that perhaps, and perhaps you saw Don there, that Mr. King had been kept under wraps by Mike Tyson's counsel, the feeling being that perhaps him being seen with Mr. King would not do him any good, and to have Mr. King in the courtroom would not be in the best interests of Mike Tyson. But for whatever attempts they made to make him look good, it did not come out good for Mike Tyson. Earlier today, of course, closing arguments in this case were delivered by, yes, Monteith Illingworth. We were going to talk about closing arguments, but I want to get Monteith Illingworth with us, the man who is Mike Tyson's unauthorized biographer. Monteith, we talked about this eventuality. What goes through your mind now, and what's going through Mike Tyson's mind now?
What's going through my mind is that this is probably the single climactic moment of ultimate tragedy in Mike's life, and perhaps in everything that his life ever symbolized.
What does he do now?
Well, I noticed 2 things in him. As the judge was reading the verdict, Mike's chest was heaving up and down, and his tie was rising and falling. But then 2 or 3 minutes later, he tried to suppress a yawn. And to me, that just symbolized everything that I wrote about him in the book. He's a man of contradictions. The yawn meant that he was trying to, with the last ounce of denial in him, make it seem as if it either didn't matter or he could beat it at some later point. but I think he's fallen deep, very deep, into a very black hole inside of himself.
Next for Mike Tyson. He's obviously now been convicted on these 3 counts. He's going to be sentenced. The judge has allowed him, though, to be free, which I don't think we mentioned earlier. Mike Tyson will be allowed to be free on the same bond. Did that surprise you?
It surprised me very much, and as she said that, I shook my head, because I think that's the worst thing for Mike right now, is to be anywhere near Don King, anywhere near the same people that were part of the problem that led to this rape. And I think he should be kept in one place, somehow watched, somehow able to, gather his thoughts and really try and get his emotions in order, because inside, I think he's really crying right now.
I've got to ask you, is he a risk of flight? I mean, the court obviously didn't think so. Is he not a risk, perhaps? His attorney, Vince Fuller, said Mike Tyson's a celebrity, he has nowhere to go. Does he have anywhere to escape?
He really doesn't, but there's a part of Mike right now that's out of control, which this conviction obviously has determined. And I see Mike being out someplace and, perhaps getting in a car crash or something happening to him. I mean, that has been the whole direction, the whole course of his life. And I think he really needs somehow to have a cooling off period. And I would have rather have seen 2 or 3 days in jail or under surveillance.
Okay, Monteith Illingworth watched Mike Tyson for a long time. Thank you. We're going to need to go back to Atlanta now. We want to get our thoughts together here and perhaps get some comments from Don King, Mike Tyson, some other folks have been here and watching this throughout. Again, to repeat, Mike Tyson guilty as charged on all 3 counts, 1 count of rape, 2 counts criminal deviant conduct. The sentence for each of those, 20 years, a total of 60 years facing Mike Tyson. Nick, back to you in Atlanta.
Well, Jeff, a question. We can't assume anything, but I would strongly suggest, I would think that he will appeal the verdict, but we can't assume the court will grant him a new trial. Is that correct?
Well, Nick, I think the entire record, Vince Fuller, as you know, a very experienced Washington lawyer, I think the entire record that was established by Fuller was established partly for the possibility of an appeal. So I think they've already been planning that. I think you're absolutely right about that, Nick.
Okay, Jeff Flock, who has been following the trial since it began 2 weeks ago today, is there for the verdict. Appropriately enough, we will be returning to Indianapolis and Jeff Flock as details warrant.
I think you could see for the first time the uneasiness in Mike Tyson's face as he left the courtroom, and why not? When you're facing up to 60 years in prison, you've got some things to think about.
As Mike Tyson would enter the courtroom, he would hear, guilty on all 3 counts, 1 of rape and 2 of deviant conduct. We will keep you updated. Sports Center will have more. As we told you, Mike Tyson guilty on all 3 counts. The verdict handed down just about a half hour ago. Right now, let's return to Indianapolis, Marion County courtroom, and rejoin our Charlie Steiner. Charlie.
John, it's been a hectic hour or so since Mike Tyson arrived in the courthouse, and within the half hour he got the bad news, guilty, as you mentioned, on all 3 counts. The chief prosecutor for Marion County is Jeffrey Modisette, and he is downstairs in the press room. He is holding a news conference now. We're going to go downstairs now and see if we can pick up Jeffrey Modisette. In the middle of the screen, that's Modisette behind the microphones. That's Greg Garrison toward the center, and Barb Trathan is off on the right-hand side of your screen in the brunette hair. Modisette is obviously a very happy man, and why don't we go downstairs now and pick up what he's got to say.
Erica Roach is one of the volunteer attorneys who's been working on this case for a number of weeks now, along with Mike Wilkins. And hiding over there is David Wagner, our paralegal par excellence. And who have I forgotten? Charlie Briley, Kerry Forrestal. All right. Well, it's like the Academy Awards, right? All right, first of all, let me thank the press for being so considerate over the last few weeks here, and thanking IPD for all the good work they did. Let me say that we're very thankful for the verdict of guilty, but I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that this is really, in some ways, a tragic moment, because 2 young people's lives have been dramatically affected. But I think that we need to keep in mind what an inspiration Desiree Washington has been to all of us. I think that everyone here, all of the crime victims, all of the rape victims throughout the country, can look to Desiree as an inspiration, because she stuck to it, and she was never dissuaded from staying with the trial all along. But most of all, I want to thank Greg Garrison and Barbara Trathan, who were actually the superstars of this case. Greg?
Good evening again, I guess, huh?
Louder!
You're getting all there is, guys. I have not spoken with her. Let me just say, on behalf of Barb and this big trial team that has worked so hard, there's a sense of almost of a festival atmosphere that one can get into very quickly at a moment like this. But of course, that's inappropriate. We're pleased that the justice system has worked once again, as we all thought that it would. However, it would have been working just as well had we lost, so long as all the same things had been done. And guys, if you want to make a lot of noise, you're not going to hear a thing, because you're hearing all I got, okay?
Mr. Garrison, to what do you owe this, specifically?
Well, let me finish what I was going to say here. This is not the first time that Barbara and I have stood before the bar of justice and listened as a person charged with the crime was found guilty. And there's a very profound sense in which it's a very sad moment every time. Sometimes we've stood there while people have been sentenced to die in an electric chair, sometimes to be sent off to do time in a penitentiary. It's never fun at that moment. And what I want to say is, while we're confident of the verdict, and while we remain steadfast in our posture versus the crime that was committed, we do have a sense of compassion for any defendant who's convicted of a crime and faces the uncertain future that this young man does. So we're not going to pop any champagne corks, but we're all profoundly grateful that the system has worked once again. So I think with that, we might take any questions that you have.
Why did you ask to revoke the bond?
I think that's pretty obvious, Lester. We've got a situation where we've got a pretty mobile person with a lot of resources, and we didn't want to have all this be for nothing, so we wanted to make sure that when we got to time of sentencing, we had somebody to talk to.
Mr. Garrison, if you were to cite the most...
I'm sorry, guys.
Piece of evidence was, what do you think really got the jury's conviction?
That beautiful 18-year-old kid with the pure heart.
How was she taking this to be talking?
I've not spoken with her. Her attitude as she got here today was somber and quiet and pretty confident. And she's a young person with a lot of courage. And I can't tell you that sounds like so much hot air, but this is a very, very special young woman.
And the fact that the jury believed her over his testimony. Was it a mistake to put him on?
No, not at all.
Why
Is
not?
there national significance here in a date rape case? Is this a nationally significant case?
Okay, good question. I think that we got to be careful with that. And it's clear that when a one-on-one crime results in a conviction, it's always a victory in a sense, where a crime like this, which is so often overlooked, as Barb said today, oftentimes viewed as half a crime, is recognized by the public and by the justice system. However, we don't want to make it bigger than it is. This person was convicted on this evidence, on this date, and as I said when I was asked so many ad nauseum times about Mr. Kennedy Smith, he got acquitted because they didn't have enough evidence, not because some prosecutor didn't do her job, and she's been bum-rapped a lot. I hope that's going to stop now. And this guy got convicted because the evidence was there today.
Did Mike Tyson convict himself, though, in the final end?
Criminals always convict themselves, I think. Next.
What's the impact on boxing? What's the impact, do you feel, on the sport itself?
I can't speak to boxing. I will say, though, that on a broader scale, professional athletics has been allowed to become such a mega god that it no longer is, at a lot of times, is responsive to the basic morality that I think makes up the fabric of communities that are represented by folks like this jury. And we've seen so many times recently where it doesn't matter what a superstar does, it's okay. He can brag about it in his books. He can demonstrate it in the public eye, and as long as it's him, it's all right. And I think that tonight, one time anyway, this kind of behavior has not been tolerated, at least not in this county.
What would you say to those who would try to make a racial case out of this?
It's a preposterous notion. We've had a good racial mix in our jury, which until the one man asked to be excused exceeded the racial composition of the county. We had a black victim and a black defendant. And the whole thing has been, that's just whole cloth and nonsense in this case.
Is there going to be an investigation of Pasha Oliver or Dale Edwards?
Under consideration.
Do you have any worries that the celebrity of Tyson might have an effect on the jury?
Sure, always.
Well, how do you combat it, then?
The jury selection process it's a bit of a debate, only to make sure that you make people commit themselves away from those kinds of things. You want them to commit away from prejudice, you want them to commit away from predisposition, and that's what we had to do in this case, was essentially make this person another citizen of Marion County for purposes of this case.
What kind of a message?
Too soon to know.
Tyson, was there ever a point in which the victim wanted to give up, wanted to throw this away, let me go home, let me live my life?
Tyson, who is continuing his news conference downstairs here at the Marion County Courthouse, upstairs in courtroom number 4, Judge Patricia Gifford's courtroom. The jurors, at least 5 of them, are holding a news conference of their own. Why don't we go upstairs there now while we have that opportunity?
Mike Tyson was guilty. Was there a turning point in the trial for you?
We did not, and I guess I'm really speaking for myself, but I feel as a group we did not come to a conclusion until the conclusion of our deliberation. We worked long and hard and came to the conclusion just before we announced.
What brought you to the guilty verdict? What evidence or impressions were on your minds that brought you to that verdict?
Was there anything that stands out in terms of evidence that sort of brought you to that conclusion?
Thank you.
I really felt that, generally speaking, we felt the state had made a stronger case, and that was certainly enough to convince us to come to the verdict that we did.
But was it the tape that was played? Was it Mr. Garrison's closing argument? Was he trying to discredit the theory of the gold digger theory? Or can you share some insights with us?
I don't think the closing arguments for either side really had much of a bearing on it. We were very careful to consider the testimony that was given, and I think it was an accumulation of that testimony that in the end made for a very strong case.
One
at a time. This lady right here, please.
How many votes did you take?
I'm sorry?
How many times did you vote?
We voted 3 times during deliberations.
What was the first vote?
Once on each count, or 3 times on each count?
3 times on each count.
What was the first vote on the main charge? Do you remember?
We did not keep track of the numbers. We knew going in that that would be a preliminary vote, and that we were just trying to gauge where the
thing was, and the accusing witness, who did you find more credible?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question, please?
Major difference in credibility between the accusing witness and the defendant? Did you find one much more convincing than the other?
I think that the accusing witness made for a very good case and had a very credible testimony.
Did you feel a warm rapport with Mr. Fuller? Did you folks feel a real close, intimate rapport with Mr. Fuller and his team? Did you feel like he connected to you folks at all? I see this guy next to you smile.
It's just smiles.
Well, I mean,
I'm just going to see how he is.
Was there a stylistic difference between the attorneys that you noticed or that affected you or caused you to feel more strongly about one side or the other?
Well, I think there was an obvious stylistic difference between the attorneys. However, I think that this particular group paid very close attention to the testimony, and without regard to the way it was delivered or to the way the attorneys were speaking to us.
So which was the key element of testimony, apart from the accusing witness and the defendant on the stand, which swayed you?
I can't say that I would find a key element of testimony. Again, I think it was an accumulation of the testimony that was given from day one.
What was your impression of the accuser? What was your general impression of her understanding?
I'm sorry?
What was your impression of the accuser?
Did you like her?
What kind of person did you see her as? What was your general impression of her?
Does anyone have any, I really don't have any
You were
specific
there for a
comment.
little over 9 hours. How would you characterize the deliberations? Was it heated? Was it calm? Was there a lot of persuading that went on amongst the jurors to get to the guilty verdict? How would you characterize deliberation?
I think there were periods of calm and there were periods that were heated but still under control, and we were very careful about trying to maintain that control so that we didn't get carried away.
Were there a substantial number of not guilty votes in the first vote?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
A substantial number of not guilty votes in your first vote?
I don't remember the exact number of the first.
You had votes for not guilty?
Yes, we did.
Did you think the fire made you closer to the group?
Sure. I think it did. I think so.
I think it made me
Why? Why?
Well, I think just in...
Together.
I mean, there was an element of danger, and I mean, we all came through it. Not that we felt any danger, but...
I can speak from a woman's perspective that the men in this jury were very much gentlemen, and they made sure the females in the group that we were first and we were taken care of to get out of the building first. So that definitely made an impression on me.
Here's your $10.
Did the women in the jury, were they tempted more to convict, or were they more reluctant to?
Yeah, was there women's perspective from this jury?
From that official's vote.
I think you need to ask one question at a time. You're getting a lot of questions. You're trying to...
Was there a women's perspective in the jury? Was there a women's perspective?
All I feel comfortable saying is on the first delivery.
We don't know. We called her. She already knew.
What was her reaction?
We're careful. We did not want to really know at that point where each individual by name stood on the various issues. That it was done by vote, and we were looking to have a general consensus of where the group stood as a whole.
Any special strain on the black members of the jury? No?
Strain?
Or strain?
No.
How about you?
No, we were here to do a job. We feel like we served it in the best way we could.
Was there a compelling piece of evidence or testimony that said to you, we've got to bring back a guilty verdict? And if so, what was it? What was it that swayed you?
I don't think there was just one compelling piece. As we said, we watched the testimony from the first day, and it wasn't an easy verdict to come with, but we think we did the best job.
Well, for example, a compelling piece of evidence. Did you wonder perhaps why this young woman, as she said, would have taken her camera to go on this date, as opposed to believing what the defendant said she was going to the hotel room for? Did you question little things like that?
Oh, certainly.
Everything was questioned. Everything.
But I mean, was there any one little thing in all of the evidence that stuck out in your minds generally?
We didn't leave out any detail at any time. I mean, we went through everything
that we thought was important in our minds. We picked the pieces, really. Why did she have a camera? What was she going to do with it? I mean, there was just literally a lot of things that we had to pick the pieces.
Did you think one was more important than the rest?
Well, I personally thought that she was under the impression she was going out to have fun. She took her camera to go out and see the sights. I mean, there's not a lot to see in Indianapolis at 2 o'clock in the morning, but they were talking about after parties. She could get pictures of celebrities.
Mr. Garrison said today that the whole world's watching. Do you think this verdict sends a message out? And if so, what is that message?
Sure. I hope it don't, really. I'd like to see people take it more as an individual type deal. I would like to see more date rape people maybe come forward with a little bit of hope that, you know, there's somebody there that they don't have to live with it forever. But I'm not saying that really we didn't do that. We took this case as a case. We didn't worry about the ramifications. All we wanted to do, and I think we did a very good job of that, we wanted to be sure of what we did, and we wanted to be fair.
Did you ever wonder where Dale Edwards, the bodyguard, was? Did you ever wonder where the guy, why didn't he speak?
Several times.
And if so, what were your thoughts?
I don't remember anybody expressing a thought about it. Yeah, everybody wondered, but it was kind of, dropped. We were told to drop it. It wasn't something that we pursued. Everybody wondered.
In the end, how many of you just didn't believe Mike Tyson's testimony? This gentleman's smiling again.
I do that all the time.
Did you believe his testimony, understand? Did you believe he lied?
Do you think he lied?
I think there were questions about the testimony of both the plaintiff and the defendant, but I think then again, after all, it was all weighed, and believe me, we weighed it very carefully, that the plaintiff's case was a much stronger case, and that we felt that there was...
The defense tried to push a line in which they were portraying their client as a predator. It appeared to us as we were talking and watching this case that they portrayed him as a predator, as a sexual predator. Did that surprise any of you that the defense was portraying their client that way? And if so, did it have any bearing on the way you considered the case?
I don't think so. I think we also recognized early on in the trial that that was the way the defendant was being portrayed by his own counsel.
Ma'am, in fact, did you have the same feeling? Did it bother you the way they were portraying Tyson and they didn't look? We were watching you as well, and a lot of that, we're looking at the different jurors and seeing how they were reacting.
With the accumulation of the evidence, yes, they were portraying her as such, but you have to weigh all of it, not just that point.
Immediately after the trial, people outside said its immediate reaction was a case of 10 whites versus 2 blacks. How do you feel about that?
That's not the way. I can't speak for them.
I don't feel that, because we talked about that also when we were deliberating.
It's not a question of color.
It's not a question
about it, or you didn't?
It's not a question of color, and when we made our first vote, I'd say it's only 2 black, and our first vote showed, both sides.
Did the mother's testimony have a lot of weight with you? She was the most emotional person who testified during the whole trial.
I think, generally speaking, although we considered all the testimony, I don't feel that we collectively gave a lot of weight to the mother's testimony, recognizing the relationship.
What about the medical testimony? What about that up there? Garrison did that, the medical mathematics.
I don't think the showmanship of the drawings on the board really had an impact. We did, however, consider the expert witness testimony by those physicians that were present.
How do you feel right now? What are your feelings now that this is over? Relief.
Ready to go home, something like.
I didn't understand about what you knew about the fire and what you know about the fire now, and what role, if any, that played in any of it.
We knew nothing about the fire.
We had no ideas. We had noticed flags at half-mast, but I think that everyone handled the situation as best as they could at the time.
Did you think it was related to the trial, the fire, to that crossing?
We continue our live, continuing coverage of the Mike Tyson trial, day 14, the day in which the verdict was rendered guilty on all 3 counts. This is the chief prosecutor here in Marion County, Jeffrey Modisette, the man who hired Greg Garrison. And what are your feelings tonight? This is obviously, I suspect, some bittersweet realities here.
Oh, there's a lot of emotions right now.
This is a difficult day because obviously difficult for Mike Tyson as an individual since he's now been convicted of rape and criminal deviant conduct. Also difficult for Desiree Washington because obviously she's been going through an awful lot as the victim in this particular case.
Are you now free to mention her name? We've been doing a lot to cover it. What is her feeling on all of that now?
My understanding is that she is more open about it now. She may be talking with you all.
What did you get a sense as you were watching the trial, and I saw you in the courtroom every day, was there one key to the puzzle that was more overwhelming than others in your case?
Well, everybody's been talking about how this was a one-on-one case. There were only 2 individuals in that room that night, Mr. Tyson and the victim in this case. But what becomes very important is corroboration. And I think it's unusual that you can have a case where you have such good corroboration. As you know, the limousine driver saw the victim as soon as she walked out of that hotel or ran out of that hotel. And then you have all the people that she spoke to afterwards. But it's very good to get corroboration like that. The one person who could have corroborated, theoretically, Mr. Tyson's story was his bodyguard, and he never testified.
The eyes of a lot of women in this country were on this courthouse for a good long time, on the heels of the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill case, on the heels of the William Kennedy Smith case. What message do you suppose the result of this case sends?
Oh, it's difficult when you think about what sort of message it sends. I mean, as an attorney, as a prosecutor, you handle each case individually, and you try to do the very best you can. Each case has to be handled on its own. You have different evidence in each case. Obviously, we hope that it will encourage women who are victims of rape, date rape, or any other sort of rape to come forward, and hopefully they will think that the process works now. But each case has to be looked at individually.
Jim Drucker, our legal correspondent, has been with us throughout the case, too. I'm sure you have a few questions, Jim.
Jeffrey, I guess an old sore among lawyers that sometimes you really don't know what the truth is, and on a continuing scale. Sometimes you get cases, you know what the real facts are. How secure are you that absolutely, positively, these were the facts? And
well, as you know, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, but as Mr. Garrison and Ms. Trathan talked about quite a bit in the closing argument, there was a certain moral certainty to the testimony of the victim in this case. She was very believable. She was always consistent in her conversations with us, and everything that she said we felt was corroborated, which could not be said for those who were trying to exonerate Mr. Tyson. So to that extent, we feel as good as we do in any trial.
How much political pressure or just publicity pressure in light of William Kennedy Smith on the heels of that, where a lot of press perhaps took that prosecutor to task? Do you feel some of that at least?
Yes, we felt a lot of that pressure to begin with, but what we tried to do was to keep that aside, focus on this case as an individual case. And as you know, we've tried to keep the whole relationship with the media under certain controls so that we could focus on the evidence in this case and not get caught up in it.
This is Jeffrey Modisett, the chief prosecutor here in Marion County, on the night in which Mike Tyson has been convicted on all 3 counts. I'm Charlie Steiner along with Jim Drucker. Now let's go back to Connecticut and John Saunders. John?
All right, Charlie and Jim, thank you very much. As you've heard, Mike Tyson is guilty on all 3 counts. SportsCenter will have full details, including getting back to Indianapolis and Charlie Steiner. They are standing by next. But
coming up on SportsCenter, this was the scene less than an hour ago as Mike Tyson left the Marion County Courthouse after hearing the guilty verdict. Hello and welcome to the show. Along with Gary Miller, I'm Dan Patrick. After 14 days, nearly 15 witnesses, the testimony in the Mike Tyson trial is finally over. All that was left for the verdict. We got that verdict a little less than an hour ago.
It wasn't unexpected, but it still shook us. It wasn't an outcome that we thought couldn't possibly happen. But on the 3rd week, the opening day of the 3rd week, they took it to the jury. We thought when it went so long that maybe it would have to go until tomorrow. But just before the end, they went on longer, and they got a verdict, and Charlie Steiner was there. Charlie, tell us about it.
Gary, we got the word about 10:25 that the jury had reached a verdict. About 25 minutes later, the jury had returned to Judge Patricia Gifford's courtroom, and it was guilty on all 3 counts for Mike Tyson. Guilty, Class B felony rape, maximum 20 years. Guilty, criminal deviant conduct, Class B felony, 20 years. And a second criminal deviant conduct charge, maximum sentence 20 years. Mike Tyson left the courthouse at 11:02 tonight, about 10 minutes or so after the verdict was rendered. He was accompanied by Don King and his close friends John Horn and Rory Holloway. We did not see in evidence, however, tonight Camille Ewald, who had been with Tyson throughout the trial. Of course, Ewald, the housemaid of the late Cus D'Amato, she had been in the front row of the courthouse every day of the trial from about the third day on. She was not with Tyson tonight. It's almost eerie that February 10th, about this time 2 years ago in Tokyo, Japan, Mike Tyson suffered the worst loss of his professional career. In fact, the only loss of his professional career, to Buster Douglas. And isn't it ironic that 2 years within the hour, Mike Tyson is convicted on all 3 counts of rape and criminal deviant conduct. Joining me, as he has throughout the coverage of our Mike Tyson trial here in Marion County, is ESPN's legal correspondent, Jim Drucker. Jim, you were in the courtroom. Explain to us, A, the reaction from Tyson, and B, from King and Tyson's close friends when the verdict came in.
It was very strange, Charlie, and to a very large extent, really unexpected. First of all, Tyson comes into the courtroom literally alone, much before his lawyers got in from their hotel. They were staying at different places. He sat alone at his table. Don King, 15 feet away with his friends Rory Holloway and others, not even looking. Tyson rocking almost motionless, but with a slow rock in his chair, looking at the blank jury box because they had not yet entered the courtroom. Then his lawyers came in, and they avoided him for a minute. But there was a look on the face, and it was unmistakable. They knew that if they had to be back in the courtroom this evening, they had lost. They all knew it because they really felt it was clear that the prosecution's closing argument in the case was probably a stronger case. Of course, for a defendant, the longer the jury is out, the better chance of an acquittal. So there he is, gently rocking in his chair, slowly. And then finally, Jim Voiles, the local Indiana attorney, comes up to Mike Tyson, sits down next to him, puts a hand on his knee and pats him gently, as does Kathy Beggs. And then finally, Vince Fuller, the lead attorney, comes in, changes seats with Kathy Beggs, whispers into Mike Tyson's ear at about the time Greg Garrison and the jury is about ready to come in. Interestingly enough, once the verdict was given out, there really was no expression on Greg Garrison's face. He was sitting 5 feet in front of me, and he and Barbara, they were exhausted, and they really just showed the signs of relief. And when they said in that press conference that we heard just moments ago that, you know, when someone's convicted, there really are no victors, yes, tomorrow they'll be able to celebrate. But to me, it was very clear that they were drained 100%. Then the jury comes in, and each one, after the verdict is given to Judge Patricia Gifford, and she announces the verdict guilty, again, no reaction whatsoever from Mike Tyson, no reaction from Don King, but Rory Holloway crying just 15 feet away.
Sentencing takes place on March the 6th, and tonight Mike Tyson was ordered to hand over his passport. What is that all about?
Well, that was an absolute riveting moment also. The judge says to Mike Tyson, it was the only words he spoke. She asked, once the sentence had been handed down, quote, "Mr. Tyson, do you have a passport?" And his answer was 3 words, "Yes, I do." Then, and I'm not quite sure it'll be reported at all because it was very mumbly in the courtroom at that stage, the judge said, "Well, I hereby remand you, Mr. Tyson, to the Marion County Sheriff's Department," which means you are in custody of the court until you hand over the passport. There was some discussion of where the passport physically was. I believe it was with Don King. Don King, who incredibly said almost nothing in the courtroom, not the Don King that you've seen from press releases or on the news, takes the passport, I believe, out of his coat pocket, hands it to Jim Voiles, one of the defense attorneys, who then hands it to Marion County Prosecutor Greg Garrison. Then Garrison approaches the bench, opens the passport, sees it is in fact Mike Tyson's passport, and then and at that stage, Judge Patricia Gifford says, "Mr. Tyson, you are free to go." One last point, we'll get into the appeal process. It was interesting, but Fuller, Tyson's lawyer, was asked by the court, do you think Mike Tyson's appeal bond should be revoked? Meaning, should he go to jail tonight? And the sentence is the one sentence, I think, from this case I'm going to remember most. Fuller turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, Mike Tyson is a celebrity. He has no place to go." Meaning, very clearly, where's he going to run? This is the amount of man who can hide anywhere in America.
And that, of course, is Jim Drucker, our ESPN legal correspondent, but certainly the man who has become somewhat of a media sensation here in the past 2 weeks was the chief prosecutor in this case, Greg Garrison, who held a news conference about a half hour ago downstairs.
Professional athletics has been allowed to become such a mega god that it no longer is at a lot of times is responsive to the basic morality that I think makes up the fabric of communities that are represented by folks like this jury. And we've seen so many times recently where it doesn't matter what a superstar does, it's okay. He can brag about it in his books, he can demonstrate it in the public eye, and as long as it's him, it's all right. And I think that tonight, one time anyway, this kind of behavior has not been tolerated, at least not in this county.
That is Greg Garrison, who is holding a news conference downstairs. We're on the main floor here at the Marion County Courthouse. Upstairs in room 4, Judge Gifford's courtroom, the jury held a news conference, and it was headed up by the jury foreman appropriately, who talked about the significance of the mother's testimony about a week ago this past Wednesday.
Although we considered all the testimony, I don't feel that we collectively gave a lot of weight to the mother's testimony, recognizing the relationship. I don't think the showmanship of the drawings on the board really had an impact. We did, however, consider the expert witness testimony by those physicians that were present.
Now, of course, much is going to be made about how the defense is going to appeal the verdict tonight. What is the appeal process?
It's not hard, Charlie. In fact, Fuller asked the judge for 10 more days to file the papers. The appeal will go to the Indiana Court of Appeals, but that will drag months and months and months.
So, to repeat, Mike Tyson guilty on all 3 counts, facing a maximum of 60 years in prison. More than likely, when all is said and done, he'll have a sentence we expect somewhere around 10 years or thereabouts. And he will be sentenced on the 6th of March. For now, for Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN, live at the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. Let's go back to Sports Center to Dan and Gary.
Thank you, Charlie. We'll have more on the Mike Tyson verdict coming up a little bit later on during this Sports Center.
Defeat for boxer Mike Tyson as he's convicted on rape charges. Monday night, an Indianapolis jury found the former heavyweight champion guilty of sexually assaulting a Miss Black America beauty pageant contestant last summer. Tyson, who's free on bond, faces up to 60 years in prison for 1 count of rape and 2 counts of criminal sexual deviant conduct. The prosecution said Tyson's trial could not be compared to William Kennedy Smith's.
This person was convicted on this evidence, on this date, and as I said when I was asked so many ad nauseum times about Mr. Kennedy Smith, he got acquitted because they didn't have enough evidence, not because some prosecutor didn't do her job, and she's been bum-rapped a lot. I hope that's going to stop now. And this guy got convicted because the evidence was there today.
In a news conference, jurors said they looked at the whole chain of events the night of the attack before reaching their verdict.
I don't think there was just one compelling piece. As I said, we watched the testimony from the first day. And it wasn't an easy verdict to come with, but we think we did the best job.
A pre-sentencing hearing is scheduled for Tuesday. Tyson's scheduled to be sentenced on March 6th.
I'm John Sullivan with CNN Headline Sports. A jury has found former heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson guilty of rape. After about 9 hours of deliberating, the jury reached a verdict of guilty and announced the decision around 11 p.m. Monday night. Tyson could face up to 60 years in prison.
The rags to riches story of boxing's youngest ever heavyweight champion takes its most dramatic turn. Mike Tyson found guilty in his rape trial. The verdict and its reaction next on SportsCenter. And welcome to SportsCenter along with Chris Myers. This is Mike Tirico. February 10th is an eventful day in Mike Tyson's life. 2 years ago, he lost his heavyweight championship in Tokyo. This year on February 10th, he may have lost his freedom.
It is believed to be the most severe conviction ever of a high-profile athlete in the history of sport. After 9 days of testimony and 50 witnesses, Mike Tyson was found guilty of rape.
The 25-year-old former heavyweight champion's life forever changed on Monday night. Charlie Steiner has the story from Indianapolis.
Here at the Marion County Courthouse, we were notified at 10:30 Eastern Time that a verdict was forthcoming. 20 minutes later, in fact, it did come. Mike Tyson guilty on all 3 counts. Maximum sentence of 20 years for rape, Class B felony, and 20 years each maximum criminal deviant conduct, digital sex, criminal deviant conduct, oral sex. Sentencing will take place on March the 6th. After the verdict was handed down, we received reaction from all over the place. We begin with the prosecution team.
Professional athletics has been allowed to become such a mega god that it no longer is, at a lot of times, is responsive to the basic morality that I think makes up the fabric of communities that are represented by folks like this jury. And we've seen so many times recently where it doesn't matter what a superstar does, it's okay. He can brag about it in his books, he can demonstrate it in the public eye, and as long as it's him, it's all right. And I think that tonight, one time anyway, this kind of behavior has not been tolerated, at least not in this county.
We were very careful to consider the testimony that was given, and I think it was an accumulation of that testimony that in the end made for a very strong case.
I would like to see more date rape people maybe come forward with a little bit of hope that, you know, there's somebody there that they don't have to live with it forever. But I'm not saying that really we didn't do that. We took this case as a case. We didn't worry about the ramifications. And all we wanted to do, and I think we did a very good job of that, we wanted to be sure of what we did, and we wanted to be fair.
And as an attorney, as a prosecutor, you handle each case individually, and you try to do the very best you can. Each case has to be handled on its own. You have different evidence in each case. Obviously, we hope that it will encourage women who are victims of rape, date rape, or any other sort of rape, to come forward. And hopefully they will think that the process works now. But each case has to be looked at individually.
Jim Drucker was in the courtroom when the verdict was announced, sampling some of the reaction with his eyes, and now he can explain what he saw. Let's begin with Mike Tyson.
Well, he came into the courtroom, Charlie, and motionless. He knew he had lost, I'm convinced, when he came in. He sat in his chair, rocked very slowly, looked straight ahead into an empty jury box, waiting for his lawyers who were coming in from another hotel.
Don King, who of course is known for outlandish reactions most of the time, was subdued. What did you see?
Don King said 2 words, "Hello, Jim." Sat in his seat and did not move until Mike Tyson had to give up his passport, which apparently Don King was holding.
Interestingly, Camille Ewald, the woman who has acted as Tyson's surrogate mother since the days that Mike lived in Catskill, New York, in the house of Customato, who had been at the trial every day from the 3rd day on, was not here for the verdict. But John Horn and Rory Holloway, his 2 close friends, were.
And Rory Holloway, in slight tears as the jury read the verdict, everyone motionless. It was eerie for 35, 45 seconds. Not one person moved, prosecutor, defense.
The prosecution maintained a low profile immediately after the verdict.
Yes, and immediately after the verdict, I think it was just their exhaustion coming through. They were more relieved that the entire process was over. They've been working on the case nonstop for 3 months.
What do you suppose is the key to the verdict?
I think the key is, and I think it's overplayed, he said versus she said. I think it was the physical evidence lined up far more clearly on the side that it was a rape. They had medical testimonies showing a very incredibly small chance that it could have, these injuries that the woman had could have been from anything other.
Mike Tyson will be sentenced on March the 6th. Already reaction is coming in from all around the world. We begin with a sampling from our ESPN boxing analysts.
The evidence on the part of the state seemed to be so much more solid than the case that Tyson's side was presenting. I mean, the corroboration was much better. And then after Tyson took the stand, I thought his cross-examination performance was very bad. I thought he was unnecessarily argumentative with the prosecutor. I thought he showed an arrogance to the jury that I don't think a defendant ought to show if he wants to get some sympathy out of those people. And I really think that he kind of blew his case there. I thought he had a good chance to walk on Thursday, and after I saw him Sunday morning, I didn't think he had a shot.
I think in our society today, there's a very interesting dichotomy going on with celebrities, in quotes, of all kinds, and athletes are among them. On the one hand, they're under more scrutiny than ever before, and yet on the other hand, they feel an invulnerability. They feel that nothing can touch them. P. Rose felt nothing could touch him, and that's why he gambled and kept gambling, kept saying he wasn't gambling. I think that Mike Tyson probably felt that he was surrounded by enough money and enough people and enough protection so that nothing like this could affect him. And after all, he had, in effect, been bailed out of some serious scrapes up to this point. So I'm sure he felt, as do many, many athletes and many celebrities, that they don't have to live by all the rules.
Mike Tyson doesn't keep office hours. He has a very wild lifestyle, and in fact, you just had to look at the people he left the courtroom with: Don King, John Horn, and Roy Holloway, the same people that were part of the problem that led to this conviction today. Mike's the sort of guy who gets in his car, drives 180 miles an hour down the road. He hangs out in bars. There was a recent incident where there was a gun found in the back of his limousine. I mean, he really needs time and someone who is impartial. And, you know, maybe this is going home with Vince Fuller in suburban Washington.
And so on paper, Mike Tyson faces a maximum of 60 years in prison, but the reality, Jim, is he won't face that many years.
Not at all, Charlie. All three incidents, the rape and the deviant sexual conduct, all happened within the same incident, so the judge will treat it as one. And for that, it will be some range between 6 and 10 years.
So now the appeal process will begin, and take us through that.
Well, it's simple. Vince Fuller, Tyson's chief attorney, asked for a 10-day extension to file the appeal papers. They will go to the Indiana Court of Appeals. It'll go on the docket. It'll be several months before the arguments are heard. If he loses there, he'll appeal to the Indiana State Supreme Court. This will go well into next year.
Mike Tyson, at least for the moment, has no passport. He still has his freedom, but for how much longer? We'll find out as the days wear on. For Jim Drucker, I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN at the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. Let's go back to SportsCenter.
And it's worth pointing out that the foreman for the jury said that they voted 3 times on each count before reaching the verdict, each count that Tyson was charged with, and there was no key element of testimony, according to the jury. They said they were not swayed by the tapes or closing remarks. They just said the accuser was more credible.
That's an interesting aspect to it. Another interesting aspect, maybe we got a hint of what was going to happen on Monday night. During the day on Monday, during the closing arguments, William Fuller, Tyson's attorney from Washington, spoke for 40 minutes from a lectern in his closing argument. It was rather drab, not very enthusiastic, and as a matter of fact, some of the jurors were described as fidgety. On the other hand, Garrison's closing argument, he was described by a Chicago lawyer who is covering the trial for Sports Illustrated as giving, quote, the best final argument that observer had ever seen. So it was really interesting, the contrast. Maybe that told us what was going to happen in this trial.
And the accuser, who was there in the morning when the final testimony was made, was not there in the evening when the verdict was handed down. And although her name was mentioned, we are still withholding her official identity.
Still much more to talk about the Mike Tyson trial. We will do that as the evening goes on, and the SportsCenter continues, including this trial really affected more than 2 people. We'll find out how the boxing world will react to life after Mike Tyson when SportsCenter continues.
Steve Wrigley, CNN, Headline Sports. The jury in Indianapolis debated 9 hours before deciding that Mike Tyson is guilty on all counts of raping a Miss Black America beauty pageant contestant. Tyson will be sentenced on March 6th and could spend 63 years behind bars.
Well, what happens to boxing when the sport experiences life without Tyson? Larry Holmes says it's open season without Mike. Bob Arum says it means absolutely nothing, saying it eliminates someone who is perceived to be a bad apple in the mix. Here are others with their reaction.
Mike Tyson is responsible for what he did in that hotel room, and it's not the late Customato, and it's not the late Jimmy Jacobs. Mike Tyson was given the wherewithal in terms of his capacity to understand. He's a bright kid. He was given the wherewithal and the breaks in life to an extent. I mean, he didn't come from, you know, any great background. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture here. But he is responsible for those actions.
Would you throw the book at him?
I think the best therapy for Mike Tyson, or the best punishment, is to leave boxing. And if he has to sit in jail until the end of his boxing career is over, then that's probably the best thing. And then he can pick up the tools of life and put away the toys, because it's the toys in the hands of this Mike Tyson that's really, you know, has led to this result today.
I can't imagine Mike Tyson getting back in the ring. He's 25 years old. Even if it were 10 years down the road, it would be very, very difficult to imagine that. I mean, I think there's, at the very least, his boxing career is pretty much over.
Wow, some powerful words. Heavyweight champ Evander Holyfield was not available for comment. His promoter, Dan Duvas, said that Holyfield will have no regrets if he and Tyson never meet. Powerful stuff there. Holyfield will probably next fight Riddick Bowe, Larry Holmes, or George Foreman.
I spoke to George Foreman just a few minutes after the decision came down. He expressed his concern for both Tyson and the young lady involved, but Foreman did add Mike Tyson did need to be around the proper friends, and Foreman added that Mike is still 25. Hopefully he will learn. Those are the comments of George Foreman. Mike Tyson is age 25. We may have to remind ourselves of that fact when you stop and consider all that's happened in his first quarter century.
Our Gary Miller with a look back at the many turns in the life of Mike Tyson. Mike Gerald Tyson's troubled past began in the streets of Brooklyn. After arrest for a series of petty crimes at the age of 12, Tyson was sent to the Tryon School for Boys. It was there he was introduced to boxing and eventually to famed trainer Cus D'Amato.
I believe he will be the youngest heavyweight champion of all time.
Tyson lived in this Catskill home, quickly learning his trade from D'Amato. He would become the youngest heavyweight champion ever, but D'Amato would never see that day, dying in 1985 when Tyson was 19 years old. In 1987, already the undisputed heavyweight champion, Tyson was charged with misdemeanor assault and battery after allegedly trying to kiss a female parking lot attendant. That case was eventually settled out of court. 1988, Tyson 3-0 in the ring, continuous turmoil and battles for control outside it. In February, he and Robin Givens married. 1 month later, co-manager Jim Jacobs dies, leaving Bill Caton as Tyson's sole manager. That June, Tyson sues Caton in order to break their contract. In August, he breaks a bone in his right hand during a street fight with boxer Mitch Green.
And at that moment, he hit me. Like a sissy, a homo, he ran.
2 weeks later, Tyson is knocked unconscious after driving his BMW into a tree, an accident reported by the New York Daily News as a suicide attempt.
Are you okay, Mike? Can you tell us what happened? No, just get out of here. Come on, please.
Okay, can you,
Wait. Robin, can you tell us? No, nothing happened. Robin, I don't believe this.
3 weeks after protecting her husband, Robin Givens describes her marriage to Barbara Walters, with Tyson meekly sitting at her side.
It's been torture. It's been pure hell. It's been worse than anything I could possibly imagine. I'm not talking about once a week. I'm talking about every day has been some kind of battle, some kind of fight.
Givens files for divorce from her, as she put it, manic-depressive husband. Tyson, meanwhile, hires Don King as his promoter that October. While the allegations and distractions mounted outside the ring, Tyson lost his title in Tokyo in 1990 after being knocked out by Buster Douglas. There have since been incidents of alleged sexual assaults, 2 in one night at a dance club. It has become part of the Mike Tyson image, even in promoting fights.
Oh, man, I can't wait till the 28th. I'm going to make you my girlfriend.
Hey, let me tell you something, you. Hey. You know something? I'm not even going to dignify that with a hand. So you know why I'm not dignify that with a hand? Because I'm going to bring myself down to your level. There's something you can't buy in that class, and you don't got none of that.
You're sweet. I'm going to make sure you kiss me good with those big lips.
Until 2 weeks ago, such talk was easy fodder for boxing's hype. Then it entered the courtroom, and Tyson the boxer became Tyson the accused.
I believe a lot of people want to see me self-destruct. They want to see me one day with handcuffs and walking in the police cars, going to jail like you seen Marlon Brando's son. People, they love seeing the scene. Look, this is what I told you. I told you he's headed for that. I told you he's headed for that.
Good job.
Exactly 2 years after losing his heavyweight crown, boxer Mike Tyson loses his rape trial. An Indianapolis jury convicted Tyson Monday night of raping a beauty pageant contestant in a hotel room in July. Tyson is free on bond but has surrendered his passport. A pre-sentencing hearing is scheduled for Tuesday. Tyson faces up to 60 years in prison.
Boxing champ Mike Tyson is back in an Indianapolis courthouse now for a pre-sentencing interview. He will be formally sentenced on March 6th. Tyson was convicted last night of raping an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant in his hotel room last July. He faces up to 60 years in prison for his convictions on 1 count of rape and 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct. Jurors rejected Tyson's claim the young woman consented to sex.
I think we looked at not only, for example, a moment in the bedroom, but a chain of events that occurred over a period of time that evening that when put all together, we felt that there was clearly the issue of consent was not given during that particular stage.
Tyson's trial put a hold on his plans to fight heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield. With the verdict in, Holyfield says he doesn't plan to fight Tyson, even if Tyson is free on bail and appealing the conviction.
I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right for me to fight anybody who's been charged or guilty of such crime. I feel that, you know, I have respect for the system. If they feel that this man have done that, then I don't think it's right for the public to see me go in selfless, thinking about myself for some money, to go out and compete against someone that had been charged with a crime such as rape.
A deputy prosecutor says the 25-year-old Tyson will probably receive a sentence of 7 to 11 years in prison.
Bob Pacello, CNN Headline Sports. Mike Tyson is free on a $30,000 bond today after an Indiana jury found him guilty of 1 charge of rape and 2 of criminal deviant conduct last night. Tyson now faces up to 60 years in prison, but legal experts say he'll more than likely be sentenced for 10 to 12 years. The prosecution obviously pleased with the verdict, saying it would send out a message to all professional athletes.
And we've seen so many times recently where it doesn't matter what a superstar does, it's okay. He can brag about it in his books, he can demonstrate it in the public eye, and as long as it's him, it's all right. And I think that tonight, one time anyway, this kind of behavior has not been tolerated, at least not in this county.
As for reigning heavyweight champ Evander Holyfield, who had to postpone a scheduled fight with Tyson, mixed feelings on the verdict.
You know, it was sad in a way, but in other situations, mixed feeling, because here's a guy that's a celebrity and was good for the game of boxing. But, you know, it's hard for me to say, did he not, but, you know, but he was guilty. They found him guilty, which I felt that, you know, the punishment suit the crime.
Former heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson faces a long prison sentence. Last night, an Indianapolis jury found him guilty of raping an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant in July. He was also convicted on 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct. Tyson is attending a pre-sentencing investigation this morning. Sentencing is set for March 6th. He could get 60 years in prison, but prosecutors say with no criminal record, it's likely he will be sentenced to 7 to 11 years. Jurors say their decision was a tough one.
I don't think there was just one compelling piece. As we said, we watched the testimony from the first day, and it wasn't an easy verdict to come with, but we think we did the best job.
Tyson is free on bond until he is sentenced.
Guilty is the verdict handed down in the Mike Tyson rape trial. Last night, after 9.5 hours of deliberating, the 12-person jury found the former champ guilty on all 3 counts, which means he faces up to 60 years in jail, but according to legal experts, is more than likely to get sentenced to 10 to 12 years.
We're not going to pop any champagne corks, but we're all profoundly grateful that the system has worked once again.
Reigning heavyweight champ Evander Holyfield, who had to postpone a title fight with Tyson because of the trial, expressed his feelings on the matter.
I would like for him had not to done that, and things worked out for us to fight, because this is what the public want to see. But I'm not selfish to the point where that it's $1. I'm missing $1 because this man going.
Headline News, I'm Lynn Vaughn. Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight boxing champion of the world, is now a convicted rapist. Last night in Indianapolis, he was found guilty of raping a Miss Black America contestant last July. This morning, he attended a pre-sentencing investigation. Charles Ziwi is standing by live now in Indianapolis. Charles has the latest on this story. Hi, Charles.
Hi, Lynn. Tyson was here, Lynn, for about an hour or so as part of that pre-sentencing investigation. That followed by about 12 hours his conviction on rape charges.
Boxer, now convicted rapist, Mike Tyson went before a probation officer to begin a pre-sentencing investigation following his conviction on rape and deviant conduct charges last night. Despite encouragement from onlookers, Tyson maintained a stony silence about being found guilty of raping an 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant last summer. Jurors who deliberated almost 9.5 hours to reach the verdict said there was no one piece of evidence that convinced them the former world champion was a rapist.
We were very careful to consider the testimony that was given, and I think it was an accumulation of that testimony that in the end made for a very strong case.
Tyson's lawyers are expected to appeal the conviction, which could send the fighter to jail for up to 60 years. Even should Tyson appeal, it is thought unlikely he will get a shot at regaining the heavyweight title. Reigning champ Evander Holyfield has ruled out a match with Tyson, while Tyson's under conviction for sex crimes.
I don't think it's right for the public to see me go in selfishly thinking about myself for some money to go out and compete against someone that had been charged with a crime such as rape.
A match with Holyfield could have brought in as much as $100 million in box office receipts. Tyson's biographer thinks the ex-champ is now washed up as a boxer.
If Mike comes out in 5 or 6 years, he'll be in his low 30s. And I don't think he'll be able to put it together.
As Tyson showed up for his session with the probation office, several demonstrators protested the verdict as being racist. Tyson fans remain faithful.
I think it was unfair. That's just how I feel. I feel like it wasn't strong enough. She didn't have just as much strong evidence as he did.
He got railroaded.
I just hate that his career is messed up because of her.
Sentencing is set for March 6th. In the meantime, the 25-year-old boxer remains free on $30,000 bail.
Lynn, it's thought to be likely that the judge in the case, Judge Patricia Gifford, will sentence the boxer to a prison term of somewhere between 6 and 12 years when he comes up for sentencing on March the 6th. Also, the young woman involved in the case, the victim in the case, the alleged victim, has sent indications out through the prosecutor's office that she will soon come forward and tell her story, dropping her anonymity here. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Charles. Some strong and pointed words from the prosecutor. Is it likely that cases like this are more likely to be tried now?
Well, I think the national women's rights groups out of Washington this morning, Lynn, are saying that very fact, that this will likely give women who have been assaulted more encouragement to come forward, knowing that these types of cases can be successfully prosecuted, that it doesn't necessarily just come down to one person's word against another, which was the big criticism of this case going in, was that it was going to be a one man's word against one woman's word. Well, the jury didn't see it that way. They looked at the evidence, and there was also some corroborating evidence, too, here. There wasn't just one person's word against another. And so I think national women's rights groups will see that as a way to get more women to come forward now.
All right, physical evidence as well as corroborating testimony. Thanks, Charles. Charles Ziwi reporting live from Indianapolis. Heavyweight boxing champ Mike Tyson attended a pre-sentencing interview in Indianapolis today. He will be formally sentenced March 6th. As Tyson entered the city-county building, onlookers chanted, "You're innocent," and "Hang in there." He was convicted last night of raping an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant in his hotel room last July. He faces up to 60 years in prison. Jurors rejected Tyson's claim the young woman consented to sex. They say they hope the verdict sends an important message.
I would like to see more date rape people maybe come forward with a little bit of hope that, you know, there's somebody there that they don't have to live with it forever. But I'm not saying that really we didn't do that. We took this case as a case. We didn't worry about the ramifications. And all we wanted to do, and I think we did a very good job of that, we wanted to be sure of what we did, and we wanted to be fair.
Tyson's trial put a hold on his plans to fight heavyweight champ Evander Holyfield. With the verdict in, Holyfield says he doesn't plan to fight Tyson. He says Tyson should pay for his actions.
If this is what he did, then it's right for him to go on and serve his time, because the fact that could be anybody's daughter, anything like that, and it's a lesson learned. I feel that, you know, with status or fame or how much money, you just can't violate somebody's right.
The president of the World Boxing Council says he still believes in Tyson's innocence. A deputy prosecutor says Tyson will probably receive a prison sentence of 7 to 11 years.
I do believe that boxing benefits, because Mike Tyson was a bad apple. He gave boxing a terrible image.
I think Mike Tyson should be in jail. I think he's pathologically a hopeless problem.
The lesson is that regardless of what's your status and money, you just can't violate someone else's right. And I guess on the other end, for all ladies to take cautious, don't put yourself in that kind of situation.
On the one hand, they're under more scrutiny than ever before, and yet on the other hand, they feel an invulnerability. They feel that nothing can touch them.
That lady in Indianapolis, she and her mother, we grieve for them, but as a rule, we want Tyson to get his life together. We really do. I mean, boxing owed Tyson that.
We wanted to be sure of what we did, and we wanted to be fair.
One time anyway, this kind of behavior has not been tolerated, at least not in this county.
They want to see me self-destruct. They want to see me one day with handcuffs and walking in the police cars, going to jail.
Welcome to this expanded edition of SportsCenter, everyone. Along with Bill Patrick, I'm Jim Bergamo, and it is the day after Mike Tyson was found guilty on 3 counts in an Indianapolis courtroom.
Most of this expanded SportsCenter will be devoted to the Mike Tyson conviction. Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion of the world, the youngest heavyweight champion ever, remains a free man today, pending an expected appeal of yesterday's conviction. Tyson was found guilty of rape and 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct. An 8-man, 4-woman jury determined that he did indeed rape an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant last July. Tyson was back in court today in Indianapolis for a pre-sentence hearing. He could be facing up to 60 years in prison. Meanwhile, the victim left Indianapolis this afternoon for a flight back home, accompanied by a police bodyguard. Her bodyguard spoke today on her behalf.
She's just glad right now it's over. She wants to get back to you know, her own life, and it's going to be a long road for her. But she's a strong girl.
While the victim returned home, Mike Tyson returned to the courtroom. Charlie Steiner reports on today's events in Indianapolis.
Tyson arrived back at the Marion County Courthouse Tuesday morning, 12 hours after his rape conviction. Accompanying the former champion, 3 members of his defense team, Vincent Fuller, Kathleen Beggs, and local attorney James Voiles. Noticeably absent promoter Don King. Tyson was ushered to the 3rd floor probation department under heavier security than we'd seen during the 2-week trial. Now, of course, Tyson is a convicted felon. Tyson underwent a pre-sentencing report interview where he was asked about his education, his background, and his personal history by the chief probation officer in Marion County, Steve Wills.
Well, Mr. Tyson was reserved. He was soft-spoken. He answered all of the questions that we asked to the best of his knowledge. When he had trouble putting together dates and time periods, he sought advice from his counsel and from his camp manager. He was courteous and very cooperative. The interview and the whole session went really better than expected.
Wills questioned Tyson for about 90 minutes, and then the former champion left the office.
I'm still in your corner, Mike. Bye, Mike.
This afternoon, the Tyson defense team, which has said nothing publicly, issued a written release on the disappointment of the verdict. The appeal process is already underway, and they say they are hopeful of getting a new trial for their client. Monday night, Tyson arrived at the courthouse with a look as if he was expecting the worst. Once the verdict was read, guilty on all 3 counts, Tyson showed no discernible reaction. After the verdict was rendered, the prosecution and the jury reacted.
I think that the in terms of a single item of evidence, probably that medical testimony, even though the evidence of injury was slight. We had a medical expert who was very believable. He was a infertility specialist, so he sees people in the appropriate circumstance enough that his shot was very accurate, and I think that had a profound effect on the jury.
I think one of the points that Greg actually made in the last part of the final argument, where how can you say that this is a gold digger, this victim is a gold digger, when the defendant, Tyson, is inviting her to stay, and she runs out of the room, basically. And he's invited her to stay. It's not a consistent defense. They just couldn't set down a logical, common sense defense with the facts they were trying to give the jury.
And I think it's unusual that you can have a case where you have such good corroboration. As you know, the limousine driver saw the victim as soon as she walked out of that hotel or ran out of that hotel. And then you have all the people that she spoke to afterwards. But it's very good to get corroboration like that. The one person who could have corroborated, theoretically, Mr. Tyson's story was his bodyguard, and he never testified.
Generally speaking, we felt the state had made a stronger case, and that was certainly enough to convince us to come to the verdict that we did.
All we wanted to do, and I think we did a very good job of that, we wanted to be sure of what we did, and we wanted to be fair.
Tyson will be sentenced 3 weeks from Friday in Judge Patricia Gifford's courtroom, where Jim Drucker gives us an idea of what's ahead for the fallen champion.
Charlie, when the probation department's pre-sentencing report is completed and given to Judge Patricia Gifford, she'll use that report to determine how long of a prison term to give Mike Tyson. But it still could be a very long time before Mike Tyson does any time. Let's take a look at the process, the way it's going to work through the court system over the next month. First, on March 6th, Judge Gifford will take that pre-sentencing report and also any recommendation from the prosecutor in the case, and any letters or any other documents that the defendant's lawyers want to present, and evaluate how long of a prison term to give Michael Tyson. Indiana's formula starts with a 10-year term for a rape conviction, but a judge can add as much as 10 more years if there are aggravating circumstances, for a particularly vicious attack or for a repeat criminal, which most observers don't think is present in this case. A judge can also decrease the sentence up to 4 years if there are mitigating circumstances, if the convicted shows remorse or on a showing of substantial charitable work. As a result, Tyson's sentence will probably range from 6 to 10 years. And since all 3 convictions resulted from the exact same incident, Mike Tyson will serve 1, not 3 sentences. And it's unlikely in a case of this magnitude that Judge Gifford would suspend the sentence, do away with it completely, something the judge has the power to do. So what's Judge Gifford's sentencing pattern? Well, in the past 2 years, her average sentence for rape is nearly 9 years, substantially less than the county's average. But whatever the sentence, with good behavior, Tyson could be out in half the time, because in Indiana, for every 1 day of good behavior, 1 day is chopped off the sentence. But any jail time could still be delayed even further, from 1 to 3 years more, while Tyson's lawyers appeal the conviction to the Indiana Court of Appeals, and if they lose there, to the Indiana Supreme Court. They have until April 6th to file any appeal. Tyson's lawyers will argue that the jury was not racially representative of the county in their appeal, and also that the judge improperly prevented 3 defense witnesses, all of whom came forward halfway through the trial, from testifying. Appeals like this are common. Success is rare. If Mike Tyson does go to prison, his first stop will be the Indiana Diagnostic Center. There, over the course of 30 to 45 days, state officials will test Tyson, both mentally and physically. And it's there that the state will decide whether or not Mike Tyson spends his time in a medium or maximum security facility. If you're convicted of rape in Indiana, a minimum security prison is not an option. And while he's in prison, he will not be able to box. He will not be permitted to box professionally and earn a living, nor will he be able to box recreationally, because in Indiana, there is no recreational boxing program. And the New York, New Jersey, and Nevada State Athletic Commissions were contacted today, and all 3 declined to answer the question whether they would permit Mike Tyson to box professionally while he's out of prison pending his appeal. Charlie?
Mike Tyson's story has been well chronicled over the past few years, but now, with his inability to fight, going away to prison, how will that impact on him psychologically? We asked some of the people who know him best.
I can't imagine Mike Tyson getting back in the ring. He's 25 years old. Even if it were 10 years down the road, it would be very, very difficult to imagine that. I mean, I think there's, at the very least, his boxing career is pretty much over.
The only guy who was going to lick Tyson was Tyson. He was always like a time bomb, self-destruct. I also made a crack a while back, and I said, oldest 25-year-old guy I ever saw.
Did you expect this?
No, I didn't expect this. No. I expected Tyson to be broke and for his career to be ruined. You know, I figured he'd do it in the ring because that's the way he's been going. He doesn't want to. He acts like he doesn't want to fight.
I have absolutely no thoughts about Tyson. He's a common criminal who's getting what he deserves. I have absolutely no thoughts about Mike Tyson. He's finished, washed up. Deserves to be. Period. He's a thug.
He learned from the best, Customado. So when you learn from the best, you know, he doesn't lose that. It's buried deep. We'd have to peel away the layers of all the influence, the bad influence that's been brought upon him by Robin Givens and Don King. And get that away and get him back to what he was. It's possible, but that's a long shot.
I've been knowing Tyson ever since '82. And he's the type of guy that pretty much middle of the road could go either way. When he was with people who try to do good, he would try to do good. And then when he, you know, once hit the pinnacle of success, and with me, you know, being there now, I realize the stumbling blocks that you run into when people tell you you can do what you want to do. And I think anytime when you lose focus, and think you more than a man, things like this can happen.
Mike, I hate what you did, but I still love you. There's still a chance for your life. America is the home of a second and third chance. There's a lot of people in this world who are willing to give you a second chance if you want it.
I've known Mike Tyson now for almost 5 years, and during that period of time, we've sat down and done lengthy interviews as many as 15 times. Can't help but get the feeling that boxing is the only thing he has ever wanted to do for a living. Losing his ability to fight is almost as devastating, maybe equally as devastating as losing his freedom itself. Tyson climbed these stairs every day for the past 2 weeks. There are no more cameras now, no more flash bulbs, no more screaming fans. Another sad chapter in Mike Tyson's life is about to begin. I'm Charlie Steiner, ESPN at the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. Let's go back to SportsCenter.
All right, thank you, Charlie. As you just saw, one question already being asked is whether or not Tyson will ever fight again. He's now 25 years old. We've just heard that his appeal could last up to 3 years, and the length of that appeal is crucial in this case. An appeal that's dragged out could make a huge difference in his return to the ring and his chances of ever becoming champion once again. If, because of good behavior, he only serves half his sentence, his return to society would mean that he would return in his late 20s or early to mid-30s. In other words, Mike Tyson may be about to spend his prime boxing years behind bars.
Earlier in the show, you heard from heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield. Of course, the fight that everybody wanted to see was Holyfield versus Tyson. That was originally scheduled to take place November 8th. But that fight couldn't come off because Tyson had bruised ribs. And then came the indictment. The fight was further postponed. And now Holyfield says that he will not fight Mike Tyson unless he serves his prison term completely or until the conviction is overturned.
Well, many questions have been answered, but of course so many more now remain. For instance, what message has been sent because of what happened in Indianapolis? And what lessons have been learned, especially by those who in the past might have been excused from prosecution simply because of who they are?
We've seen so many times recently where it doesn't matter what a superstar does, it's okay. He can brag about it in his books. He can demonstrate it in the public eye, and as long as it's him, it's all right. And I think that tonight, one time anyway, this kind of behavior has not been tolerated, at least not in this county.
I think in our society today, there's a very interesting dichotomy going on with celebrities, in quotes, of all kinds, and athletes are among them. On the one hand, they're under more scrutiny than ever before, and yet on the other hand, they feel an invulnerability. They feel that nothing can touch them. P. Rose felt nothing could touch him, and that's why he gambled and kept gambling, kept saying he wasn't gambling.
Athletes are coddled. They are admired and worshipped. Some of them are passed through life by parents, by coaches, by schools, by society, and some of those will have the attitude that the laws of man and nature do not apply to them.
I'm sure he felt, as do many, many athletes and many celebrities, that they don't have to live by all the rules, as in fact we've seen politicians live by in the past.
I hope that it will make athletes, entertainers, and anybody else who thinks that they being coddled and being favored gives you special privileges, think twice about it when that happens. I'm not sure who's guilty in it, so I'm not sure if the right verdict was handed down, but I do know that there are people in those fields that feel that they can take advantage of their fame and their situation, and I'm sure people will keep a more hands-off approach to sexual relations anyhow from here on in.
I think that a lot of people who are famous or notorious have learned from this experience that fame and notoriety and celebrity is not an excuse for rape or any crime, that if you commit a crime that you're going to be held to the same standards that anybody else would be held to, and that's the way it should be. Justice should be blind, and in this case I think it was.
I think even more than just a rape situation where there's an unknown, an anonymous accusee, an anonymous victim, I think it will help in those celebrity rape kind of situations.
Glad that there is a conviction in a strong rape case. Presumably it was a very strong case, or they could not have proved it beyond a reasonable doubt, and therefore it sends out a message that somebody can be convicted of rape, and that women are not going to be afraid to bring up the charge when it's legitimate.
And the lesson is that regardless of what's your status and money, you just can't violate someone else's right.
The boxing career of Mike Tyson, what this means to the sport, these questions seem meaningless to me. I've been getting angry with some of the people who've called me today asking, well, won't you fight him while he's out on appeal? No, he's a rapist. He belongs in jail.
And for what it's worth, the dates February 9th and 10th are ones that Mike Tyson would just as soon forget about. February 9th, 1988 was the date of his wedding, the start of his ill-fated marriage to Robin Givens. February 10th, 1990 was the date of his first and only loss as a pro boxer, that loss to James Buster Douglas in Tokyo. And 2 years later, to the day, Tyson was convicted of rape.
Well, the man who delivered the knockout punch on Mike Tyson in the courtroom was a local Indiana prosecutor named Greg Garrison. And today, Garrison sat down with our Charlie Steiner to talk about the case and his respect for a local defense counselor who was part of the Tyson team.
And I won't use the cliche toe-to-toe, but you were going eye-to-eye with Mike Tyson. What in the world were you thinking about as you were face-to-face with him?
You mean besides hoping he didn't hit me?
Yeah. Or including hoping that he wouldn't hit you.
I did not think him to be volatile and uncontrollable in that regard. I was pretty impressed with him in his direct examination, not with the content, because as you probably can figure out, I didn't believe him. But he had been well prepared, and everybody knows that he is a very disciplined person at some levels. He can train effectively. He can learn what he's taught, what people try to teach him. And I knew my old friend Jim Voiles was probably one of them that was going to do a lot of the work on him, so therefore I knew that I wasn't going to break him anywhere. I read him a little bit through Jim Voiles, not from what Jim has told me, but from my watching the two of them together. Jim is a very caring person. He's very good at getting close to a person in trouble. And I noticed that they related, so I thought, well, there's something in this guy. I mean, he's not just a brutish beast, to steal an old phrase, but at the same time, he is given to such behaviors as got him convicted of this crime in this case. And so the mix doesn't go together very well. And when you add to that one of the quickest and most powerful people that anybody ever saw, it's a very frightening combination.
By nature, you deceive for a living.
Yeah.
And where did that come from? When you sit down to put together a cross-examination, why was that your leadoff hitter?
We did a fair amount of research on him and interviewed some people that knew him pretty well. And those close to boxing said boxing is the penultimate deception. And those who are good are those who can hit from nowhere and create a target that cannot be seen, that doesn't exist. Smoke.
When this expanded edition of SportsCenter continues, we will hear from Tyson himself as he talks about his troubled past. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Those of you awaiting the tip-off of the Purdue-Illinois game, hang with us. You won't miss a thing. It's coming up right after this expanded edition of SportsCenter. And now back to Mike Tyson. And through the years here on ESPN, we've heard from Tyson talking about his personal life, his professional life. Here now, Mike Tyson talks about what he's been through.
Being brought up in Brownsville at a young age, as you know, I've been corrupted with the bad crowd, and I met people, and I was in an environment where all the wrong things that you did was the right thing. Our whole motto wasn't about how tough you were, how good you could fight. It was how much money you had in your pocket. That was our whole issue, you know. I mean, we wanted to look nice, dress nice. I mean, we were looking nice. We didn't want to fight anyway, but we had to fight because guys would get mad because we looked nice and try to take our stuff. But we didn't want to fight. We just wanted to look nice and be decent people. That's what's good. You know, I used to be in the city. I used to always get in a lot of trouble. You know, I used to be a nuisance. I used to always be corrupt, a little bad kid, mostly chaos and everything. I was just bad, I guess. And a friend of Cuss knew me, and I was in trouble in a bad boys' home. And he was a good friend of Cuss, and he used to fight under Cuss, and he brought me up here. And that's how I met Cuss. My celebrity status, I don't wear jewelry. I don't consider myself a superstar. And like the money that I make, that you talk about the big allowance, I bled for that money and everything I got, and I don't part with it easy. And I'm enjoying myself as a 19-year-old boy. Everybody's going around saying, he's just a boy, he's just a boy. But I'm going to be the only boy to be king of the world.
What about girls? Tough to go out with girls?
Even if I wasn't champion, it wouldn't be tough for girls.
You always been lucky with the ladies?
Always been lucky.
Yeah, that's good. So what's tough? Because they won't leave you alone now, or what?
Yeah, isn't that, will you believe that?
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that what you work for in a way?
How do you work to get rich? You know, I'm happy that I'm getting paid, but even if I wasn't getting paid the great deal of money that I'm getting paid, I would still be happy just to be the best. You're going to marry somebody, you trust them, and that's what marriage is all about, is being together for the rest of your life. For this stage of my life, I do have many a millions. My wife would just have to ask for it, and she has every penny I have. If she wants it right now, take me, she could leave right now. Take everything I have and just leave. She has the right to do that. She has the power to do that. She's still here. She tolerates and I love my wife.
Getting the shot that will finish things in his uppercut. What an uppercut by Douglas, and down goes Tyson.
It's my first time in life losing, besides fighting, you know what I mean? I've lost in life, things in life, people dying in your life, adversities in life, and I've always been able to come back. You know what I mean? It's part of your character, and what are you made out of? I know it went wrong, but you just can't explain it. Like I said, you know, he said, man, you can't explain it. I know. He said, I've been there before because I've been there. You know what you did, but you just can't explain what happened, right? You know, but you just can't explain what happened. It's, oh, God. It's one of those nights you just can't explain. You're like,
And that's really what it was. It was just one of those
yeah,
nights.
You're like, bye-bye, Tito, bye. I believe a lot of people want to see, they want to see me self-destruct. They want to see me one day with handcuffs and walking in the police cars, going to jail, like you seen Marlon Brando's son. People, they love seeing the scene. Look, this is what I told you. I told you he's headed for that. I told you he's headed for that.
I am the only black woman sportscaster on the network level, so I know the pressures of being a role model for young people. Children of all colors idolize athletes who perform superhuman feats. In the black community especially, we are constantly in search of people to look up to and admire. Mike Tyson is someone I never wanted a child of mine to look up to. Out of the ring, Mike Tyson constantly failed all of us. Even in his testimony, he dishonored us. But Mike Tyson is a tragic, misguided figure who has attracted too much attention for his misconduct. No one relishes seeing a world-class athlete cut down in his prime by himself. Of course I'll miss seeing him in the ring, but I'm relieved that he has been found guilty. This verdict is a relief to all women, but especially for one quiet, humble 18-year-old who stood up to Mike Tyson the way no one else has. And today, this young woman is my hero.
Tyson
Tyson woke up today not only as the former heavyweight champion of the world, but also as a convicted rapist awaiting sentencing. This morning, Tyson reported to the county probation office in Indianapolis about 12 hours after being pronounced guilty of raping and committing criminal deviant conduct against an 18-year-old beauty queen last July. Jeff Flock has more from Indianapolis.
Is there anything at all you want to say?
Mike Tyson turning a deaf ear to questions about his rape conviction as he makes his way out of Indianapolis. Ironically, Tyson boarded an Indianapolis to Cleveland flight just as he did, according to prosecutors, as he hurriedly left town last summer after raping an 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant. Even flamboyant promoter Don King was uncharacteristically closed-mouthed.
Did he feel justice was served at all? You answer that. Did the accuser lie on the stand? You answer that.
You asked for a just, fair playing field. Do you think you got that?
The handlers can laugh all they want. The fact is Mike Tyson is realistically facing something in the neighborhood of 6 to 12 years in prison. This one in Plainfield, Indiana, to start. Just how long a term to be determined, in part by Tyson's appearance at this pre-sentence interview here inside the Marion County Court building, and an investigation of his past deeds and misdeeds, which will follow.
Mr. Tyson was reserved. He was quiet and soft-spoken. He was very respectful. He was cooperative.
A stark contrast to the picture Tyson's own lawyers painted of him for the jury. Arrogant, disrespectful to women, persistently propositioning the contestants at the 1991 Miss Black America pageant, propositioning them for sex. It was a picture of a man that jurors found reasonably easy to convict, too easy for the Tyson faithful.
If you get 12 blacks, you're going to have at least 6 of them who are intelligent enough to see that there's a reasonable doubt. And there are many reasonable doubts.
Tyson's lawyers may argue that the pool for the jury did not contain enough blacks. But the fact is that 3 blacks made it on the 12-person jury, and that is a larger percentage than the black population here in Marion County. 1 black juror was excused after this fire at the jurors' hotel. The fire, though, may be a more successful appeal route. Interviews with jurors immediately after the verdict suggest they may have been biased by the fire. Listen closely.
Did you think it was related to the trial, the fire? Did that cross any of your mind?
Oh, yeah.
When it crossed your mind, what did you think?
Well,
All we could do was speculate.
While Tyson went back to Cleveland, his ears plugged to reporters' questions, his victim returned home, too. Of reports that she plans to sue Tyson for damages now that he's convicted, her lawyer says it is now more likely she won't sue than she will. I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, Indianapolis.
Tyson surrendered his passport moments after being convicted late Monday night, but he is allowed to travel freely in the United States before his sentencing March 6th. Fred?
Well, obviously, this whole sordid affair has sent ripples throughout the sport of boxing, as big as a tidal wave, or tidal waves, if you will. How is the sport reacting tonight? We have a sampling from our Jim Huber.
2 years ago on Monday night, almost to the very hour, Mike Tyson fell for the first time in his career. And the boxing world stood absolutely stunned. He was, after all, invincible, wasn't he? That he could be beaten by a jury of his peers 24 months later simply had that same world busy pointing fingers.
I saw it coming, I must tell you, when he left Kevin and Steve and me to get involved with Don King. The handwriting was on the wall.
I blame King. You know, I go after King any chance I get, you know. I seem to be the only person doing anything about it, saying anything.
People like Don King have not been good for the sport. I think with Tyson out of the picture, King's power will be greatly diminished. And if King faded from the scene as well, boxing would benefit.
There was an immediate display of moral indignity from the reigning heavyweight champion, with whom Tyson was scheduled to share a proposed $100 million fight somewhere along the line.
I don't think it's right for me to fight anybody who's been charged or guilty of such crime. I feel that, you know, I have respect for the system.
But with Tyson out of the picture, other familiar faces now have a shot at much larger harvests.
I wanted to fight for the title, but it really put a bad taste. You don't want to inherit a big position in boxing by way of a downfall of a young man at all. You want it, but you don't want it in that fashion.
The way I look at this sincerely is that everybody's replaceable.
it's not the end of the world.
Boxing withstand a lot of devastating blow, and it's a very strong sport. It's a powerful sport, and it will recover.
The media can once again focus on the decent young men who are the prize fighters, young and not so young, like Foreman and Larry Holmes and Evander Holyfield.
But as the sport busies itself rearranging its furniture, there stands Mike Tyson. What of him?
He already was eroding. His skills were terribly down. AD after Douglas. I don't see when he gets out at 32 that he's really going to be the threat that he has been in the past as a great, great talent.
He's a good man. He just needed some good friends at a time in his life he just didn't have them. And I feel sorry for that. But there's still hope. Lots of hope.
If Mike requested to see me, then I would come and see him, and I would talk to him. I would love to be Mike's friend, even now. I think now is a time where that people really need a friend.
A friend, think of it, in a sport which has never distinguished itself for brotherly love. Jim Hubert, CNN Sports.
And you're wondering perhaps about Tyson's fighting future. Jose Suleiman, president of the WBC, says his body will take no position on Tyson fighting until sentencing, March the 6th, and he could fight while under appeal. IBF President Bob Lee says if incarcerated, Tyson would not be rated or permitted to fight for the title. The same holds if the case is under appeal. But neither body would sanction his fights if Tyson were behind bars. And it would be interesting to see if any promoters or state boxing commissions would handle a Tyson fight at this stage in any case. Hannah?
Well, Mike Tyson was arguably the most popular boxer of our time. The question now is, will the sport survive his conviction? Other champions have gone to jail. Boxers have died in the ring. Fights have been fixed. One bout was even televised nationally from a prison where one of the fighters was serving time for armed robbery. Yes, boxing has survived many an outrage, but its future now depends on the talent that is waiting in the wings. And our Michael Cowman takes a look at three of the sport's most promising young athletes.
As Mike Tyson loses his freedom, Evander Holyfield says goodbye to the biggest payday of his career. Their planned showdown was expected to earn Holyfield a minimum of $32 million. Now he's left searching for an opponent.
We're just in a new era of heavyweights, you know. The Lennox Lewis, the Michael Moore, and the Riddick Bowe.
They are three of the best heavyweights boxing has to offer, all young, hungry, and undefeated. Michael Moore's a natural right-hander who fights southpaw with power. A relative newcomer to the heavyweight division less than 2 years ago, he was 50 pounds lighter, fighting as a light heavyweight.
It's like the waiting game. But if I was to get the call, oh yeah, jump for joy. Because I'd be the heavyweight champion of the world.
Lennox Lewis is the 1988 Olympic super heavyweight gold medalist. He disposed of Riddick Bowe in the finals, then moved back to his native England to avoid what he calls the gold medal media hype.
The champion right now is Holyfield, but he's there for the taking. Like I said, me, myself, I'm knocking at the door. I'm just waiting for them to open it.
Riddick Bowe is the highest-ranked heavyweight of the trio, known for his quick jab and his quick wit.
It's unfortunate that I wouldn't fight the best fighter of my era. I feel like Tyson would have been the best fighter of my era to face. But now I have to contend with these other knuckleheads.
Well, Moore, Bowe, and Lewis can all boast unbeaten ring records. They have, for the most part, fattened up on marginal competition. And that raises a question. Just how legitimate are they when it comes to being contenders in the heavyweight division?
One loss at this point in my career could mean a lot. You know, the fact that I go in there with an unblemished record makes people realize and stand up and say, who is this guy?
It doesn't matter. As long as I keep knocking people out, they'll recognize me. It doesn't matter who the guy is in the opposite corner.
Well, Holyfield's management says either Foreman, Holmes, or Bowe lie ahead for the champ. One boxing manager has it narrowed down even more.
I'm hoping that right here at the Mirage Hotel on May the 8th is where that fight will take place.
Oh, I would love for that to be my next fight. If the fight happens in May, then you'll be looking at the new heavyweight champion of the world.
Well, of course, I would like to fight Riddick Bowe because he's a young fighter and he's up and coming. And I think right now people are kind of tired of me fighting people that they feel that wouldn't be a challenge.
And some other young hopefuls will be waiting in line. I'm Michael Cowman, CNN Sports.
Well, it's great to see the young talent in the sport, the up-and-coming talent, but thank goodness for the heartwarming stories like George Foreman and now Larry Holmes coming back. It's sort of ironic that they're almost returning to save the sport at a difficult time.
The most compassionate reaction to Mike Tyson and the woman involved in that rape comes from former heavyweight champ George Foreman.
Initially, we were grieved, especially for the young girl who was affected most and her family. Then I feel like Tyson's been a victim too. He just has not had the right friends along his career. This could be a great man and an asset to any community if he could get his life together. And I'm hoping that when it's time to sentence him, that there'll be a little mercy extended for him.
Coming up on SportsCenter, Mike Tyson the day after. The reaction pours in.
Mike Tyson was a bad apple. He gave boxing a terrible image. He's finished. Washed up. Deserves to be. Period. He's not fun.
They want to see me self-destruct. They want to see me one day with handcuffs and walking in the police cars, going to jail.
Still trying to absorb what had happened in Indianapolis. Now, more than 24 hours later, the reaction is still coming in with the Mike Tyson verdict.
I think we're still trying to absorb what happened in Indianapolis, Gary. We do know an Indianapolis jury felt Mike Tyson's actions spoke louder than his words. The squeaky voice of the former heavyweight champ could not mask his image of being portrayed as a predator. Tyson remains a free man today, pending an expected appeal of Monday's conviction. Tyson was found guilty of rape and 2 counts of criminal deviant conduct. As for the victim, she left Indianapolis earlier this afternoon. She was accompanied by a police bodyguard on her flight back home, and he spoke on her behalf.
She's just glad right now it's over. She wants to get back to you know, her own life, and it's going to be a long road for her. But she's a strong girl.
Tyson was questioned today about his finances, and he might be ordered to reimburse the victim for medical costs, counseling, and other expenses. As for Tyson, this was the scene tonight in Cleveland as he arrived home, met by members of the media and an adoring fan who had a special message for the former champ.
I'm sorry, buddy. I wish I could get you back everything you had over there.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm really sorry. Can I get a picture with you, please?
Yeah.
Please? Can someone take a picture with us? Please? Thank you. Thank you.
After getting the picture taken, Tyson would not comment to the Cleveland media. Gary?
Now that Mike Tyson has been found guilty, the next step is to find out just how much time he'll have to serve and look into an appeal. Although his background was not admissible in the trial, it will be considered in his sentencing. And ex-wife Robin Givens may tell authorities about their troubled marriage. Charlie Starnick continues the day after for Tyson, while Jim Drucker looks into the chances for appeal or forever fighting again. All right, thank you, Charlie. Well, there appears to be no outlet for Tyson to continue boxing until at least after he served his time. How long he serves may determine whether he ever fights again. At age 25, if the appeal process is drawn out, fails, and he gets a severe sentence, his days in the ring are probably over. We'll have much more on Mike Tyson throughout the show. Dan?
Indianapolis probation office had to do with his finances. According to the Washington Post, Tyson made over $100 million in his boxing career, but his net worth is reported to be less than $15 million. Over the last 12 months, Tyson spent $5 million on shopping sprees, $5 million on legal fees, and that does not include the $2 million he owes the law firm that represented him during his trial. This Sunday night, ESPN will bring you an hour-long special as we take a look, examining the life and times of the fallen champ. Mike Tyson, the lost champion, airs at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
On March 6th, Mike Tyson will be in Indianapolis for sentencing, and also present will be the 18-year-old woman he was convicted of raping. The college freshman and former beauty pageant contestant wants to testify, according to her attorney. The attorney declined to reveal just what the woman might say, but added she might surprise some people, but it's for her to say. And if Judge Patricia Gifford sends Tyson to prison, he will not be allowed to box while behind bars. Kevin Moore, a member of Indiana's Department of Corrections, said boxing is not one of the recreational activities offered in the state prison. Attorneys bought some time before sentencing, and another delay might be forthcoming. The original date for sentencing had been pushed back from March 6th to March 27th, with the defense saying they needed more time to prepare. Turns out the prosecutor's office has a scheduling conflict with the March 27th date and plans to request another continuance to April 3rd. Meanwhile, sometime Tyson advisor and full-time millionaire Donald Trump on Thursday proposed an alternative to sending Tyson to prison. The Donald said, why not stage a Tyson-Evander Holyfield fight with part of the proceeds going to the 18-year-old rape victim and another share to rape and abuse victims in Indiana. Why ask why?
A lot more good can be done by having Mike Tyson pay a substantial award, both to the victims subject to court approval and creating award for people that were abused or raped in the state of Indiana.
What about Donald Trump's attempt at buying Tyson's freedom?
I told you. Not going to dignify that with a response. The end.
And that is that.
Now to boxing, and Donald Trump wants to know if Mike Tyson's freedom is for sale. Following his rape conviction, Tyson called Trump seeking his advice. This afternoon, Trump held a press conference where he outlined a plan to keep Tyson out of prison. Trump has suggested that proceeds from a Tyson-Evander Holyfield bout be set aside for the rape victim, and another share would go to the state for victims of the crime.
Tremendous amounts of money can be given to victims of rape, to victims of abuse, and I think it can be a lot stronger than throwing somebody into jail for a long period of time and really making him a ward of the state.
Donald Trump's proposal is so insulting to not only women as a gender, but to rape victims in particular. The man clearly, despite his money and extensive knowledge of world events, doesn't have a clue what it means to be a rape victim.
Indiana officials called Trump's plan, quote, offensive and inappropriate. Tyson had his sentencing date pushed back to March 27th to allow his defense more time to prepare. This Sunday night, Charlie Steiner will spend an hour taking a closer look at the lost champion, Mike Tyson, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
We have to talk, of course, about Mike Tyson. We've been talking about him, it seems, since before the trial, since well before the trial. I have to ask you, first of all, what is the long-range effect of all of this going to be on the sport?
Well, you know, you have to figure the long-range effect is not going to be that as bad as it may seem right now. I mean, boxing survived the loss of Muhammad Ali. It will certainly survive the loss of Mike Tyson. In the immediate future, however, we lose the gem that everybody wanted to see, which was Tyson Holyfield. We also lose the possibility of Tyson George Foreman. Those are big fights. But you got to figure 2 or 3 years down the road, Tyson would have been on his way down anyway. And someone, boxing history shows us, always comes along to replace these guys.
Incidentally, before we get too far astray, the date for sentencing originally March 6th, and now that's not going to happen.
No, now it's been moved back to March 27th at the request of Tyson's defense team, and I understand the prosecution wants to move it back yet another week, so it looks like Tyson won't be sentenced until April 3rd. He buys himself at least another month of freedom.
Well, I feel like that's all we've been talking about in the sport of boxing for a long, long time. How many talk shows have you done? How many talk shows have I done over the course of several weeks? You just saw the show that we ran right here on ESPN just before we came on tonight. Everybody, it seems, has an opinion about what holds forth, both for Mike Tyson, the heavyweight division, and the sport of boxing in general.
Boxing has always been a showcase for the good, the bad, and the ugly anyway. I mean, you can't hurt it and you can't help it. It'll be here. It was here before Tyson came, and boxing will be here long after George Foreman and Tyson have left.
Mike Tyson has a short-term effect on the business, and that is that all the fans that had looked forward to seeing the great confrontation between Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson are going to be deprived of that.
Well, I'm looking to fight the end of May or early June.
Do you know who yet?
Most likely Ready Bo George Foreman.
I do believe that boxing benefits because Mike Tyson was a bad apple. He gave boxing a terrible image, and his absence from the sports maybe will allow sponsors to come back so we can see more boxing on free network television.
I can't imagine Mike Tyson getting back in the ring. He's 25 years old. Even if it were 10 years down the road, it would be very, very difficult to imagine that. I mean, I think there's, at the very least, his boxing career is pretty much over.
Who was that last guy?
I don't know, but he looks familiar. You know, a couple of thoughts struck me out of that. Number one, my opinion and Dan Duber's were about the same, which worries me a little bit. Number two is that would Bob Arum be saying the same thing if Tyson was under contract to him?
That's a very good question. Also, you heard Holyfield talk about what might be next for him. Actually, what might be next for him is not what he talked about there.
No, not at all. Apparently now it looks like they're going to fight Larry Holmes sometime in May, which I think is a pretty interesting fight considering Holmes' performance against Ray Mercer last week.
What a surprise.
A group of ministers is joining the fight to keep boxer Mike Tyson out of prison. It has circulated petitions at 30 churches Sunday. 20,000 signatures were collected. The petitions ask an Indianapolis judge to consider Tyson a fallen hero and give him a suspended sentence. sentence. Tyson faces a maximum of 60 years in prison for raping an 18-year-old Miss Black America contestant. He will be sentenced March 27th.
According to an Indianapolis TV station, the FBI is investigating charges that the head of the nation's largest black church tried to coerce Desiree Washington into withdrawing her rape complaint against Mike Tyson. The story continues. The president of the National Baptist Convention admits he spoke with Washington but denies trying to get her to drop the charges against Tyson. Also Wednesday, an Indianapolis attorney claims to have overheard a juror claiming the trial was fixed. The Marion County prosecutor intends to question that juror.
Tuesday night in a suburb of Cleveland, police say Tyson was clocked in his red 1991 Beamer, going 73 miles an hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. He faces a March 4th court date for that, but could avoid it by paying a fine of about $90. Meanwhile, reports said that one of the jurors who found Tyson guilty was overheard saying the trial was fixed are being investigated. The juror was allegedly talking to others about the trial at an Indianapolis gym, where his comments were overheard by several people, one who brought it to the attention of the prosecutor's office. And while other jurors in the case say there's no way anyone could have gotten them to fix the outcome, this next man, who does not want his name to be made public, says he knows what he heard.
And when he said that, I was like, this guy is stupid. You know, that was the first thought came to my mind. I'm saying, he's stupid and they're stupid, because I became frustrated because of the fact that he came in there and he just had this little straight face, and he's like, man, it was rigged. I didn't have no other choice.
Being sequestered, we cannot talk to the public at large. We only could talk among ourselves and to the deputies and bailiffs who were around us all the time. Of course, the judge admonished us not to even talk about the trial among ourselves, so we never did until it was given to us for deliberation. So there's no way anybody could have gotten to us.
And finally this, Tyson's victim, Desiree Washington, says she was offered $1 million to recant her story before taking Tyson to trial. She makes that claim on ABC's 2020. Washington wouldn't say who offered the money, but she said she told her lawyers about it. The FBI looked into the allegation, and the Marion County Prosecutor's Office says as far as it's concerned, the case is closed.
Mike Tyson was caught moving too fast. Mike Tyson may not be in a hurry to receive his sentencing, but he was in a hurry going somewhere. The former champ received a speeding ticket Tuesday for going 73 miles per hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone on Interstate 90 in suburban Cleveland, Ohio. The arresting officer said Tyson was polite and courteous. The $92 fine, though, probably nothing compared to what lies ahead for Tyson's rape conviction.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Steve Albert. Welcome to another edition of Showtime Championship Boxing. We begin tonight on a very serious note. Here at Showtime, we covered Mike Tyson's last two fights. When he joined us ringside to call the last two fights, he was in the midst of criminal accusation. Now, since he stepped onto the heavyweight scene, this complex and compelling young man achieved a level of recognition and notoriety that transcended sports. Schools of New York by harnessing his natural gift for combat. Those fistic skills transformed him into the youngest world heavyweight champion in history. His brashness and brute power seemed appropriate accessories to his royal status. They also served as a lightning rod to the media and fans. He was forced to live his life in a fishbowl. He became a multi-million-dollar business. And when the architects of his early success passed away, there were others to support him. While personal problems and distractions outside the ring chipped away at his aura of invincibility, the upset loss to Buster Douglas proved that he too was human. The shocking defeat in Tokyo left the boxing world wondering if he could regain his winning ways. Tyson resumed his war on the heavyweight ranks, obsessed with regaining the crown. With boxing's most prestigious prize again within his grasp, Tyson suffered a rib injury in training. More damaging to his career than the injury, however, was the fateful trip to Indianapolis. The career that seemed endangered after Tokyo, that seemed revived after 4 consecutive victories, was in jeopardy due to an accusation of rape. The world watched as Tyson was indicted and convicted. Mike Tyson's powerful fists had propelled him to astounding heights. What remains for him now may be out of his hands. I'm joined now by my partner, the fight doctor, Ferdy Pacheco. You got to know Mike Tyson. Here's a guy who had it all. What do you make of his situation?
Well, it's an old story, you know. The kid that comes out fights so hard to get victory, to get where he wants to go, and then he stumbles and falls. But it's not a new story, and I think the measure of a man's character is how he responds to adversity. It's now up to Mike. He's at a crossroads. He can make something out of this adversity. If he does 3 things, I think he needs professional help in order to sort out his personality difficulties. I think he also should expand his mind. You know, a few months ago when we were doing these shows, I went over to do an interview with him that was going to be 15 minutes at his house. It expanded to about 5 hours of talking about books. I'm not talking about books on boxing. This guy was reading biographies. He was comparing the Slaughter of the Lambs book to the movie. He was very bright and articulate. I enjoyed talking to him, and I thought, what a waste. This guy can really develop his brain. If he can do that, and if he also can maintain the physical abilities that he has, I see no reason why he can't come back and challenge for that which was taken away from him, or which he lost in the ring. I see no reason why he could not once more challenge for that which he was, the heavyweight champion of the whole world.
Well, with that, Ferdy, it's a great pleasure to bring in a special guest commentator on the situation. Phil Berger, noted boxing writer for the New York Times, a Mike Tyson biographer. You were at the trial in Indianapolis. Where does Mike Tyson go from here?
Well, it's now up to the judicial process. You've got lawyers, you've got Judge Gifford, and you've got a prosecutor, and they'll sort that all out in the months to come, and we'll see where that leaves Tyson. It may leave him to go directly to jail. It may leave him at large as the appeal process is played out.
From a boxing standpoint, is Tyson's career over?
Well, again, that's going to be part of the judicial process, and it'll depend on the jail term that he draws, how soon he gets out, and what kind of frame of mind he's in as to whether he wants to fight again or not.
Phil, how about an overview of Mike Tyson's career in your estimation?
Well, Mike Tyson came along at a time the heavyweight division was really almost defunct. There was no life in the heavyweight division, and he brought the passion and a dynamic kind of performance to it that enlivened the heavyweight division, and he really made a name for himself, and the shame is that he's now blackened that name.
And with Tyson out, where does this leave the heavyweight division today?
Well, you know, I got in last night and I ran into Harold Smith, who's Larry Holmes' advisor, and he was saying Holmes and Holyfield, sort of chanting it and telling me that he believes that they're very close to that fight. However, I met Riddick Bowe's manager, Rock Newman, this morning at valet parking, and he says he expects to hear within the next 24 hours whether his man, Riddick Bowe, will get the fight against Holyfield.
Thanks very much, Phil.
My pleasure, Steve.
All right. With Mike Tyson out, the focus now shifts to other heavyweights who are vying for Evander Holyfield's world heavyweight title.
Time now for Ringside Report, a weekly magazine of boxing news. Brought to you by Sports Cream. When muscles hurt, rub in Sports Cream for fast pain relief. So what are you doing June 19th?
Well, I kind of thought I'd hang out here in Las Vegas and watch Evander Holyfield and Larry Holmes fight.
That's a good idea. I think it might be actually an entertaining fight, and a lot of people are really giving Larry Holmes a legitimate chance to win that fight.
Well, you know, the thing is, in beating Ray Mercer, Larry Holmes may have proven that almost anything is possible. Certainly, Evander Holyfield cannot afford to take him lightly. He knows that from his fight with Bert Cooper. And so I'm sure Holyfield will be as motivated as he can possibly be against Larry Holmes. And Larry Holmes, one thing we can say about him, he got himself in extremely good shape to fight Ray Mercer, and you know he'll do that again.
New rankings at the WBC released today, and one thing I know for certain is there is a very angry manager about the sport of boxing.
Yeah, and Rock Newman has never been angry before, has he? No. Anyway, and in this case, strangely enough, he has a right to be angry because Razor Ruddock was pushed ahead of his fighter, Riddick Bowe, in the WBC rankings. Lennox Lewis is 4th, Michael Moore is 5th. And the only reason you can think of for Riddick Bowe being pushed ahead of Razor Ruddock, other than the fact that maybe Don King wanted Jose Suleiman to do it, because then the next guy would fight against Evander Holyfield after Mike Tyson gets sentenced. The only reason you can think of it is that Ruddock has fought more often against better quality of opposition. But let's face it, it's wrong to move Riddick Bowe down when he's already in the second spot.
How does that happen? Those rankings are so objective.
Well, I think they're objective, and certainly they're fair. So you can't make the case that something would go on as far as shenanigans. No, the fact of the matter is, I mean, it doesn't take a great cynic to feel that something happened here to make the hierarchy of WBC want Razor Ruddock to be second instead of Riddick Bowe. And this is to take nothing away from Razor Ruddock. Fought two very tough fights against Mike Tyson. He just beat Greg Page, although it wasn't a great performance. And so he's a very good fighter. You can nitpick as to who you think should be second or third, but once Bowe is second, there's no reason when he doesn't lose to push him down.
Yeah, Riddick Bowe has done nothing wrong so far, and he's done nothing to disprove his statistics and the fact that he should be there. Fact is, he should be there.